All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase, colon. Today I'm bringing on Aimee Wagstaff. How are you doing today, Amy?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm outstanding. Thank you for asking me. Amy is like a superstar, power hitting, you know, cleanup hitting attorney. I can't go through her entire background because it's cut to the chase, but I will say that I will put a link in my show notes, so you can see all the fabulous work that she's done, including having one of the first trials in Roundup and getting an $80 million verdict. That's amazing.
80.2.
80.267 10 cents. Also, they threw in the 10 cents. So that's great.
Thank you.
And that was the first trial in federal court, Roundup.
Yeah, that was the first and only federal trial to date. Yep.
And tell me, just, before we get into the meat of our show, was that appealed? What's the status?
Yeah, so Monsanto, we won, and the verdict was back in March of 19, which is surprisingly already 3 years ago. And Monsanto appealed to the Ninth Circuit. We won at the Ninth Circuit with a very conservative panel by all respects. And then they have filed a writ to the United States Supreme Court. After fully briefing the writ stage, the Supreme Court when was that? Last November, so 2 months ago, asked the Solicitor General to give its opinion give her opinion on whether or not they should take the writ. And we expect the Solicitor General to come out with an opinion probably in May, June, July timeframe. And we suspect and hope that we will have an answer to the writ by the Supreme Court in probably September, October, November timeframe.
Wow. All right. So that basically, the gist of that is whether the administration would essentially take a position on the whole issue.
Yeah, and not even on the merits, to take a position on whether or not the Supreme Court should take the case, right? Because, for example, in this particular situation, there's no circuit split, right? Every single court that's heard the preemption issue has determined that there is no preemption except for one, but that was in Georgia, and that was, we think, distinguishable, but there's no circuit split. And so the whole thing with the Supreme Court is that you don't have a right to go to the Supreme Court, right? And they take what, like 1%, 0.5%, 0.25% of all cases. So not only did the lower courts get it correct, which is certainly our position, but the broader position on the writ issue is that there's no circuit split. Why waste the Supreme Court's time with something that every single court agrees with?
Yeah. All right. So Roundup, weed killer, industrial agriculture. It's a major issue, how we get our food, where we get our food, what they're doing to make sure the food grows and the weeds don't overwhelm the food. Now we've gone from Roundup. Now all of a sudden I'm hearing about another weed killer that's causing chaos everywhere, Paraquat.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. The floor is yours. What is going on with Paraquat? What is Paraquat and what's going on?
Yeah, so Paraquat is a weed killer that was developed, is the brainchild of Chevron and Syngenta. It's their love child. And so that probably tells you all you need to know. But if you want to know more about that, it's a weed killer that, unlike Roundup that you would spray on seeds and on plants, Monsanto really created the GMO movement, right? They created the genetically modified organisms, the GMOs, by using Roundup. They created seeds that could withstand that. Paraquat is something that is more of an all-kill spray that's done at the end of every growing season, right? And what happens is it is exceedingly popular. Like Roundup, it's been in our ecosystem, in our environment, in our farming world for decades and decades and decades. It has been known for a long time to get into the blood system, and it goes through this little, if you put your finger on the back of your head and you feel that little bump, right around there, there's like a sheath, like a barrier. It's called the blood-brain barrier. And what happens is Paraquat gets in to your bloodstream, very similar to how Roundup gets into your bloodstream, and it gets carried up into that spot, and it crosses through the blood-brain barrier, which is something that Syngenta and Chevron have known for decades, that this happens. And then it goes inside your brain, and it's just like a pinball machine, and it causes mass chaos, and it intercepts with the dopamine receptors, which control all of your voluntary movement. And slowly but surely, it creates neurological problems, and the onset of Parkinson's disease, and Parkinson's symptoms happen. And I don't know what you or your listeners know about Parkinson's, but it's really a one-way, it's really a one-way train. It's not like, if you're comparing it to the NHL with Roundup, which is horrific and terrible, and I don't in any way, shape, or mean to lessen what NHL is, but in NHL and with cancer, you can go through chemo, and if you are lucky enough to survive, which not everybody is, but if you are lucky enough, you can go into remission. Parkinson's is not that way. When you get it, it is a degenerative disease, and eventually, if you live long enough, you will become frozen in your own body and unable to move while your mind stays sane and you kind of know what's going on. It is one of the most horrific conditions that could happen to somebody.
All right. So NHL, yeah, no, it's actually, so Roundup, NHL, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a cancer, form of a cancer. And the Roundup in and of itself was not causing it. It's the active ingredient glyphosate, which is the focus of a lot of countries now, is to ban that ingredient.
Well, so our lawsuit was about the mixture. Our lawsuit was about the formulated product. So Roundup, if you're talking about Roundup, it has glyphosate is the active ingredient, right? That's the kill agent. But then you have all of these surfactants, which Paraquat also has too, by the way. But you have glyphosate, and then you have these surfactants, and the surfactants help the glyphosate bind to the plant and sort of spread out, right? So, I mean, if you came up and you poured a bunch of water on a plant, it would just sort of fall off. But here in Roundup, you have the surfactants, and you have glyphosate, and then you have a bunch of other byproducts, and you have a bunch of other unknown ingredients and things. In our lawsuit is that the whole thing is a lot more deadly and a lot more dangerous than glyphosate alone. But certainly glyphosate alone, we believe, is cancerous. And we believe the surfactants alone are cancerous. POEA is the specific surfactant that was used in most of the Roundup. In 2019, Bayer bought Monsanto, and Bayer is a German company. Bayer is what we call it here, but it's called Bayer over in Germany, is a German company, and POEA is banned in Germany. And so they would pull it out of the Roundup they were selling in the United States. So Roundup is a secret sauce. And one of the things that makes Paraquat more dangerous, so Roundup comes in a pre-mixed, right? Nobody goes to the store and buys the glyphosate and buys the surfactant and makes the mix together. So the way that you get exposure in Roundup, if you're a residential user, is really by spraying it in the drift that kind of comes back on your body. And if you're a farmer, you can make big drums of it and things of that nature. Paraquat is sold by itself. And the tagline from the company is that a sip will kill you. It is a restricted pesticide. You have to have a special license to use it. License not hard to get. I've gone online and got it. It takes about 20 minutes. It's really just a safety course. It's free. It's put on by the EPA, and you get a little license that says that you can use it. But it became a restricted pesticide or a restricted pesticide because people were using it for suicide and murder. Literally, one sip, one thimbleful, one less than a shot glass will kill somebody. And so that's not necessary. I mean, you got to think, like, why in the world would we be putting something like that in our soil? And why in the world would the EPA be allowing something like that in our ecosystem? And unlike Roundup, which has been embraced throughout the world by a lot of the regulatory agencies, Paraquat has been banned in most countries. And they have put in an odor so that if you accidentally start to drink it, because like I said, it comes by itself. And so you mix it with things, and some people will put it in a random container in their garage. And I don't know, I guess some people were starting to drink it by accident. So they've put a nauseous inducing thing in there, so it will make you throw up if it touches your stomach. They've put a big smell. They've put it as a separate color so that you won't accidentally drink it. It's a very dangerous drug if ingested. And so that's part of the lawsuit. And then another part is the inhalation and the dermal exposure. So you have ingestion, dermal, and inhalation. And the inhalation and dermal, like I said, goes into your bloodstream, and just, you're never the same. And our experts that we've retained, and we've retained some of the best experts in the world, and a lot of them are the same Roundup experts, say that even the smallest amount of exposure can do the damage. It just takes longer to do it, right? So if you kind of imagine like one pinball going around, knocking things around and disrupting everything, takes a lot longer to cause the mass, chaos than if you had like 1,000 of them. So it doesn't take a lot of exposure to cause neurological damage.
All right, so the EPA has permitted Paraquat for decades now.
Yes.
And did they know about these issues when they gave the permit?
Yeah, and so what the EPA does is, the EPA's registration is, and this is a big thing that actually is sort of being litigated in the Supreme Court with respect to Roundup. The EPA's registration to sell a pesticide is not a forever stamp of approval, right? It's not something saying that, in 1970, we agreed that you could sell this, and therefore for the perpetuity, we're just going to say it's safe, and that it's safe for all people. So, the litigation is just getting started. We're probably a year into it. Depositions are starting now. And we are finding there's a lot of stuff the EPA didn't know. But again, the EPA, what I think people need to understand is the EPA doesn't do its own testing, right? I mean, the EPA is not out there conducting tests or taking it and putting it into, they don't have a laboratory where they're testing it. The EPA is basically analyzing data given to it by the actual company itself that is making billions of dollars selling it, right? So there's not really an incentive for these companies to, be exceedingly forthcoming so that the EPA may pull their registration. So yeah. I don't think that was an extremely long-winded answer to say, I don't think the EPA knows everything that they should know. I don't blame this on the EPA.
All right. So what essentially is your lawsuit about? What is the claim? That the product is, can kill you, or that they didn't warn the users about how to use it, or the dangers? Where are you going?
Yeah, so it's a negligence and failure to warn claim, right? I mean, here in the United States, you can put out exceedingly dangerous products as long as you warn, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of different ways that you can fail to warn. And we believe that all of the ways that you can fail to warn, I don't really think this is a manufacturing defect claim, although maybe it will turn into that. But I think it's sort of a defective device, failure to warn, and failure to warn that it causes neurological damage and causes Parkinson's. They've never warned about it. They still claim that it doesn't cause that. The science shows that it does. And I think that a jury, when it finally goes in front of a jury, I think a jury will agree with us.
All right. So you were talking about one drop can kill you. And I thought what I heard you say was they put some ingredient in it that would, if you did swallow it, would make you throw it up.
That's right.
So when you're saying that's the manufacturer. Correct. So they have to be acknowledging at some level that the product is extremely dangerous.
Oh yeah. They're acknowledging that if you drink it, it will kill you. I mean, if it's a product that has the crossbones and the skull, and it says, when you so you have to take a test to buy it. Yeah. Now you have to have the test to spray it. But up until about 6 or 7 months ago, you only had to have the test to buy it. So what would happen is that the head of a company would go buy it in these big drums, and then people would use it. But to take the test, like I said, I've taken, one of the questions is how much will kill you? And the answer is like 2 ounces or something.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. So just in terms of like the audience, going back to Roundup, I could go into Home Depot and buy Roundup and pour it on the weeds in my yard or whatever. And that would be the way that I would use my Roundup. In addition, commercial farmers also use Roundup. But now my understanding is that you can't go to Home Depot and buy Roundup. They took it off the market for the consumers using it.
So for Roundup, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, no, you can still buy it for Roundup. They have said that they are going to take off residential. So you're making a distinction between residential and commercial.
Yeah.
And they've said they were going to take it off of residential in sometime in 2023. So next year, whether or not that they, no one's forcing them to do that. So they could always change their mind. But that's their party line right now. They're going to take it off in 2023, but keep it available for farming, for commercial.
All right. Is the same thing going on with Paraquat? Do people residential? And when we're talking about residential, it could be an individual that has a house.
Well, so I think it was around 2000, it may have been the year 2000. It is no longer available for residential use. Now, people who have it commercially can use it residentially, but they could use it, I suppose, but it's really a commercial case. It's really for farmers and for people who live in farming communities. It's not, Paraquat is different in that regard, that it's not your everyday user, except for it was in the 80s and 90s. And, you didn't used to have a license. You didn't used to need a license to get it.
So the commercial user of Paraquat, the farmer, like, let's just kind of walk through the way. I mean, is this something like you spray? Are they spraying it from airplanes? Or is there somebody in a suit and just going around with a sprayer? How does this actually, like, from the moment the product gets put into use to the time that somebody gets Parkinson's, walk us through that? What transpires?
So all of the above. And, it would depend on how the particular farm chooses to spray, right? So we have cases, and this is where it's not a farmer who uses, but we have cases where there is aerial spraying. And so it is, there are communities, one that comes to mind specifically is the Central Valley in California. There's probably places down by where you live that have these sort of farming communities where the planes take off, crop dusters, and they just spray all over. Anyone below them that gets exposure is at risk, one. And then if you're sort of the direct, I would think the people in the actual planes are probably the safest in that situation. Although I'm it's kind of going down, and I would think that the actual sprayers in a crop duster are safe, and it would be the people underneath. But I have clients who say that they were outside when those, crop dusters were spraying, and they would, get it on their skin. I can't even imagine that. Yeah. And then you have the people who actually are out there they aren't wearing Tyvek suits or anything. That's part of the problem, is that these companies aren't warning. So, if they're you think where farmers are, you don't have a lot of farmers where it's cold, right? It's usually warm. So they're probably wearing not a ton of clothes, probably short sleeve shirt. Probably, I'm guessing most of them wear pants. But it's usually in the California and Floridas and sort of central US where it happens, where they're actually spraying themselves. Oh, and then they have, you drive through Kansas and they have those machines that kind of, go through the fields like that. But there's got to be people who walk around and make sure that they work.
Yeah. So, all right, you talked about actually drinking Paraquat.
Right.
And that could kill you. Forget about Parkinson's. That, like, you're dead?
It will kill you. Yes, you would be dead. If you drank Paraquat when we started this podcast, you would be dead by the time we finished.
Okay, all right. Well, coffee, water, and red wine, that's it. I'm sticking with that. All right, so, all right, so now what are the other ways that, so you're not using Paraquat, but it's, oh my God, there's the plane, and oh my God, I got it on my skin. How does it, I mean, if you get
Yeah,
it on
so
the skin, are you at risk, or do you have to
yeah,
ingest it or inhale it? How does this go?
if you get it on your skin, that's what we call dermal exposure. And it soaks into your skin. And that is the exact type of exposure that we proved in Roundup. It soaks into your skin, it gets into your bloodstream, it goes into a dermal reservoir, and it can sit for a while. And then little carriers, who flush out your blood and keep your blood moving, will push it to your blood-brain barrier. You can inhale it. So I told you that in Paraquat, it comes by itself and you have to mix it with surfactants. Well, so you can just picture mixing it. You're like looking over it and you're inhaling it. Well, your nasal passageway has a direct passageway into your brain that doesn't have the same blood-brain barrier that's in the back of your head. So you figure, your head is stuck to your neck, and there is a sort of a sheath or a screen that stops stuff from going into your brain. Our brains are so sensitive and complex and amazing, and we can't just have anything we put in our body going into our brain. So there is a like a screen, picture like a screen, that you'd put on a window, and the Paraquat just goes through it, and then it can't go back out. And so it just bounces around, but in your nose, it can go straight into your brain, and it's a direct way to get in your brain. So those are really this litigation right now. It could expand, but the litigation right now, as we are litigating it, is really about inhalation exposure and dermal exposure.
All right, so your failure to warn, let's just say they said, you're right, we should have warned. How would anybody be able to use this product safely then?
Well, so similar to Roundup, at this time, we're not calling for it to be pulled from the market. I mean, my personal opinion is that it probably should be, but that's not what this litigation is currently about. And so I think that the way that people could use this safely is that you don't do aerial spraying, first of all, and you do not have people around when you're doing mass spraying. And the people that are around take certain precautions. They're either in a cab of a truck spraying it, or they're completely head to toe Tyvexed spraying it. But there's literally no warning right now causing it. And also part of it is, in America, we're allowed to do our own risk benefit analysis, right? I mean, that's what we're allowed to do. And someone may use a product because they think, oh, well, if I drink this, it'll kill me. Because they warn about that. And they may use that product because they'll say, well, I'm not going to drink it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's easy. I'm not going to drink it, so it's not going to kill me. But our clients aren't told that just inhaling it, just smelling it, which is virtually impossible not to smell, could cause you to tailspin into one of the worst and most debilitating diseases known to a living person. I mean, I've had clients that said they'd rather be dead. I mean, it is, I don't know if you've ever seen anyone go through Parkinson's, but it could be one of the worst and most dehumanizing things that can happen to someone. And so, people need to have the right to understand, do I use this product that is, effective? Sure, it kills all the weeds, but there's a lot of other things I could use that wouldn't put me at risk of this. And that's sort of the crux of the litigation, is that people get to decide, how important is it to me to not have weeds? How important is it to me that I just douse something with this stuff at the risk of me getting Parkinson's? I mean, that they've taken that choice away from all of our clients.
All right, so just for some basic science, Paraquat is a pesticide, Roundup was an herbicide.
Well, they're kind of one and the same. They're both pesticides, yeah, and they fall under that umbrella.
What is a pesticide versus an herbicide?
So pesticides are herbicides, so they kind of fall into that umbrella.
Okay, so what's the herbicide then?
So here it is Paraquat.
but what in general is an herbicide? When people use
Versus,
that thing?
yeah. So an herbicide, so the herbicide that we're talking about is just, it is used to kill vegetation, and it's used to kill plants.
Yeah,
And that is a type of a pesticide. A pesticide is more of a chemical that is used to kill more things than just a plant. Pesticide is the bigger umbrella. I'm sorry, I'm being so confused. Pesticide is up top. Herbicide is a type of a pesticide. Under pesticide is also things like insecticides, rodenticides, things to kill rodents, other animal repellents, fungicides, things of that nature. So pesticide is like the big umbrella, and herbicide is a type of it. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. And it does, I mean, you know, when you just think about it, it doesn't surprise me that these products are causing us harm or
Right.
killing us. I mean, if it's killing a plant and an insect, why wouldn't I think that it's not
Right.
gonna, you know, cause me some serious damage? All right, but now, you know,
It's not a hard sell to the jury to tell you that like a pesticide, this chemical that is designed to kill, is actually killing.
yeah, it's working, but just to, you know, so the weed killer is killing more than the weeds.
Mhm.
All right, so what, you know, I know you've come up with, you know, you've explained how the product, how Paraquat is causing Parkinson's. Is there any scientific studies that lay this out? Or are you just relying on one doctor who, you know, you found off the street and having them say whatever you want to say? Is there any scientific literature or anything like that? I'm
Yeah.
playing devil's advocate here. But.
Yeah, there is scientific literature saying that. We have given that all to our experts. I'll tell you that there is somebody who has been litigating this case for a couple of years. And those cases were just resolved. And then the MDL just is getting ginned up. So we have experts that we have retained that have already been subject to Daubert, the state court equivalent of Daubert. We have experts that have and passed. This lawyer settled his cases on the eve of trial, if you will, metaphorically, but I think it was like 2 weeks before. And we have experts that have looked at it, and our specific experts that we used in Roundup and that we use in Paraquat have told us that this is a much better scientific link and connection than NHL and Roundup, which we think is a great connection.
All right, so you said the status of this case, of the cases that you're handling, MDL, multi-district litigation, bunch of cases were filed all around the country, and then they get consolidated in front of one judge.
Correct.
And
Federal cases.
Federal cases. So there are federal cases, and then there are state cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where is the federal MDL?
The federal MDL is in the Southern District of Illinois, in front of the Honorable Judge Nancy Rosenstengel. And the Southern District of Illinois is basically St. Louis, right? It's like East St. Louis. You fly in the St. Louis airport. So it's basically St. Louis, but it's across the state line. So it's in the Southern District of Illinois. And then there's a state court consolidation, a JCCP in California in Contra Costa, which is where Chevron is located. And that has about, so the federal MDL has right now about 600 or so cases. The state JCCP has, 50 or so. And then there's a spattering of state court cases kind of put throughout the country.
Okay. All right. So I think that covers pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. Is there anything that you think the audience should know about the cases, the Paraquat? I mean, let me, you know what, I'm going to throw out, this is coming out of left field. All right. We've got a lot of people on the planet to feed. All right. And the weeds continue to evolve biologically. And, what was working years ago doesn't work anymore in terms of getting rid of them. Is there a solution to weed killing, to dealing with the weeds? That I know this is not your expertise, but you've been in the weeds for some time now. and you talked to a lot of the experts. So I know this has got to cross your mind at some point. We got to eat.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this was a big defense of Monsanto in our litigation in the MDL in California, and the federal judge rightfully said, hang on a second, this is residential we're talking about. This is, it's a different analysis with spraying it, to get rid of weeds, to feed the world. They had we call it the feed the world defense. They said exactly what you just said with residential. And I think that, there's a lot of ways to make safer chemicals to cut down on weeds. And then there's just the warning, right? I mean, it's really, a lot of it comes down to warning. I mean, if you yourself are going to go out and be a farmer, I think you have the right to know what you're putting yourself at risk for. And you may not say, this job that I'm doing is worth getting that. You may not say, okay, I'm going to have a 20% greater risk of getting a debilitating disease if I go work my summers on this farm. And you get the right to do that. That's one of the great things about living in this country. I don't know. I'm not in the weeds enough to know that I have a solution on how to feed the world if we get rid of weed killers. And, I think I've said a few times in the course of doing podcasts and interviews like this, like, it's not my goal and it's not my desire to rid the world of all weed killers. But I will say that I think that, Monsanto in particular, has poisoned our food chain of the entire world by creating Roundup. I think that Roundup is so prevalent that it is now in the rain. I mean, people test the rainwater and they will find Roundup in it. By creating GMOs, they have created, I'm really kind of going far afield here, but when our grandparents were growing up, there wasn't this organic, non-organic debate, right? Everything was organic. And then, everything was just sort of, then Monsanto and other companies, not just Monsanto, create the GMOs, and they create this thing where, there was lobbying to get them to put on their packaging that they were GMO foods, and the lobbying companies won. So these companies did not have to put that they are GMO foods, that they are chemical heavy foods. And so instead it created the organic movement where people said, well, if you're not going to say that you are full of chemicals, then we're going to say that we're not. And in doing so, it's priced people out from being able to eat organically. I mean, I don't know if you eat organically or not, but if someone really wants to try to eat a non-chemical diet, you have to spend a lot of money to do it. And it's a real shame that it's that way. And that, you go and you look at a lot of the problems in this world, and you look at a lot of the health issues in this world, and you look at the healthcare in this world, and, you can lead a lot of it back to diet. You really can. I'm a firm believer that what you put in your body fuels what you do. And people who don't have a lot of money or who don't make a lot of money can't afford to pick up the organic apples, that are twice as much money as the chemical apples. They just can't do it. And I think that these chemical companies have done a real disservice to the entire world, and they've created more problems than we can ever fix.
In our lifetime.
So how's that for an answer?
That's a good answer. All right, so that's going to wrap up this show. Amy, thank you very much. This is Aimee Wagstaff. She's spent the entirety of her professional life fighting against pharmaceutical and medical device companies who obviously are putting profits over people. And if you're one of these people, maybe you got Parkinson's and you're like, hey, I wasn't touching Paraquat or whatever, but I saw that it was spraying over my head or whatever. Give this lady a call. I'm going to leave her bio so you can get all of the information on the show notes, okay? And we're going to be on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and all that. So no matter how you want to see it, it's there for you, all right? Thank you, Amy, for coming on. Thank you. And have a good day, all right?
You too.
All right, that's it. That's it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. 71 episodes. You know what to do because I know every one of you has listened to every single show, sometimes repeatedly. Subscribe, rate, review. Leave me comments. If you want me to ask questions or topics, let me know. I'm here to entertain, educate, and also illuminate some of the bigger problems that we are faced with. So have a good day, everybody.